At his 28th birthday celebration, someone presented him with a woman in front of me as a gift. Breaking from my usual gentle demeanor, I smashed a glass and disrupted the entire gala. Alone, I moved out, carrying my luggage. Everyone said I, a helpless orphan with no one to rely on, wouldn't last 3 days before slinking back. He didn't care in the slightest. An orphan girl, away from the Liu estate, where else could she possibly go? But countless 3-day periods passed, and some even suspected I had died outside. Only then did he call for the first time. But he found the number was disconnected. Much later, at a renowned painter's exhibition, a portrait of my profile caught his eye, leaving him lost in thought. He offered an exorbitant price to buy the artwork. Caleb smiled apologetically. This is the portrait of my wife I'm most satisfied with. I can't part with it. It was Edward's 28th birthday celebration. I wore the most exquisite formal dress, appearing alongside Edward, my arm linked with his. As soon as we stepped down, Edward released my hand, leaving me standing there alone. Everyone's gaze followed Edward. I was forgotten in the corner. People successively presented Edward with gifts. With a nonchalant expression, he gestured for Mr. Arthur to collect them. It wasn't until someone presented a beautiful woman that everyone's eyes turned towards me again. Looks of pity, anticipation, and mockery. Over the years, I had seen too many such ill-intentioned stares. A momentary flicker of surprise appeared on Edward's otherwise expressionless face. The woman resembled his deceased first love too closely. Presenting a woman to me right in front of Mrs. Liu, you really have some nerve, Edward said with a mocking laugh. The gift giver replied obsequiously, Mrs. Liu is generous, I'm sure she won't mind. It wasn't that I wouldn't mind, they just calculated that I wouldn't dare to mind. A helpless orphan, raised by the Liu family. Ho! Could I dare to say no to the new head of the Liu estate? Edward twirled the wedding rings on his finger, a smile spilling into his eyes. Since Mrs. Liu agrees, take her away. Before Edward could finish, I walked up to him in a few steps. Looking at the woman's face before me, the gift giver truly had a thoughtful heart, knowing exactly how to please Edward. Suddenly, I felt utterly exhausted. I couldn't seem to follow Grandma Margaret's words and continue to maintain the dignity of Mrs. Liu any longer. With a gentle push, I sent the champagne tower behind me tumbling. The beautiful crystal glasses, stacked high, collapsed with a crash at a mere touch. Shattered glass and liquid flew everywhere, the gala site descending into chaos. Someone gasped, Mrs. Liu has gone mad. I had ruined Edward's birthday gala. But he didn't seem to care much. Mr. Arthur had already arranged for the guests to leave, and the staff would clean up the mess on the floor. The woman remained, standing quietly beside Edward. Even her demeanor seemed uncannily similar to Edward's first love. Comparing the two, it truly made me seem like the one who had lost her mind. Edward held and played with the woman's fingers in his hand, looking at me as he spoke carelessly. Why are you so angry? If you don't want to see her, I'll have her stay elsewhere. Don't worry, I swore to Grandma Margaret I would never displace you as Mrs. Liu. The woman beside him also chimed in, trying to persuade me. Mrs. Liu, why bother getting angry? How could a man like Mr. Liu only have one woman? I merely admire Mr. Liu, it won't affect your position. I took off the rings from my hand. I placed them on the table in front of Edward. He raised an eyebrow. I'm returning the rings. Edward picked up the rings and tossed them into the air. The dazzling light of the diamond rings flashed as they fell back into his hand. He threw them back to the woman behind him. They're yours. Millions wore of rings, and Mrs. Liu just decides she doesn't want them. Edward stood up, gave a cold laugh, and instructed Mr. Arthur. Find some etiquette teachers for Mrs. Liu. I don't want to see such rude behavior again. After walking a few steps, he turned back. He threw the rings from his own hand onto the ground. The rings rolled across the floor, coming to a stop at my feet. Since you don't want the rings, just throw them all away. Edward left with his people. The roar of the departing car's engines was especially loud in the night. Mr. Arthur sighed beside me. Madam, why did you have to upset the master? You know he resents you. I picked up the rings at my feet and threw them into the trash can. Mr. Arthur, please go about your business. Don't worry about me. Mr. Arthur sighed and left. I went upstairs alone, changing out of the elaborate formal dress. I put on a white tee, found my luggage, and took out all the clothes that clearly belonged to me from the wardrobe, packing them into the luggage. When other couples have a fallout, they still need to consider divorce agreements. But my connection with Edward was so shallow, only a pair of rings remained. No one could have imagined that in the grand wedding that caused a sensation throughout the city, the bride and groom never legally married. I still remember what Edward said at the wedding. Only Eleanor's name was meant to be on my marriage certificate, Evelyn. You shouldn't have married me. But what could I do? I still married him, the man I had loved for 7 years since I was a girl. I thought that one day I could move him. But in the end, I became the nominal Mrs. Liu in everyone's eyes. When I dragged my luggage out, the whole mansion was silent. It was just like that rainy night when Grandma Margaret first brought me back. 13-year-old Edward stood on the stairs, looking at me coldly. But then he turned and went to the kitchen. He brought me a cup of warm milk. I booked a flight. After a 6-hour flight and a 3-hour car ride, I returned to the Riverbend, the remote little town in the south. They say people want to return to their roots when they get old. But in fact, a homeless person misses their hometown especially, even if there are no relatives left in that hometown. I rented a cottage in town. The local dialect was familiar yet strange. I was young when I left, and I had been in Northwood ever since. I had long forgotten how to speak it. Fortunately, the residents in the cottage next door were also from out of town. They just arrived earlier than me. That day while buying groceries, I couldn't understand an old woman's dialect, and he helped me out. The next day, I made muffins as a thank you gesture for his help the day before. Only then did I learn that he was a painter here for inspiration. He looked like he had just graduated from college, radiating a passionate, youthful vibe, away from the people and events of Northwood. In this simple environment, I suddenly realized that I was only 25 years old. Yet because I was at the Liu estate, always putting on the airs of Mrs. Liu, I always felt like I was already old and stuffy. I bought some flowers from the street and planted the cottage garden full of roses. Beside the flower bed was a small rocking chair. Though simple, everything was just as I wanted. The garden at the Liu estate was full of yellow roses that Eleanor loved, and the greenhouse housed an expensive piano. Edward had specifically designed it for her back then, and no one was allowed to touch it. Back then, Grandma Margaret wanted to have those roses removed. It made Edward furious. If the roses are gone, I won't need to come home anymore. The matter was never mentioned again, and Eleanor and those roses became forbidden territory at the Liu estate. In the afternoon, there was a knock on the cottage door. Caleb, wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack, saw me open the door and smile. Brightly. Evelyn, I'm planning to go up the mountain to paint tomorrow morning's sunrise. Do you want to come out for some fresh air? Saying that, he pointed to the mountain not far behind us. I knew that place seemed quite famous. Tourists usually came to the town for that mountain. I felt a little tempted. You don't need to be scared. I camp often, I'm very experienced and it's safe. With his enthusiasm, I finally nodded. Caleb was indeed, as he said, very experienced. He immediately went back to his place and grabbed another bag. He carried both sets of camping gear himself, with his painting tools in his hand. I wanted to help him carry some, but he firmly refused. I'm very strong. Carrying this stuff isn't tiring at all. On the way up the mountain, we talked about the past and the future. My past seemed uneventful. It was nothing more than revolving around the Liu estate, revolving around Edward. In the end, I became the Mrs. Liu with only a title at the Liu estate. But Caleb was different. He always had endless new stories and boundless visions for the future. Life is an experience. My dream now is to become a famous painter, so I have to work hard for my dream, right? Just between you and me, I ran away from home. If you find the cottage next door empty one day, maybe I was caught and taken back by my family. I smiled at him. I didn't expect that we were both escapees. It's just that he still had family who would come looking for him, while my disappearance, perhaps Edward would even celebrate. We reached the mountain top just in time for the sunset. The warm golden light bathed us, creating an unreal sense of beauty. I looked down at the town below, bathed in golden light, quiet and peaceful. Caleb was already busy setting up the tent. I asked him, "The sunset is beautiful too, aren't you going to paint it?" "I prefer the sunrise. Every day is a new beginning, representing infinite possibilities and vitality." I sat on the stool Caleb had brought out, watching him busy himself, but my mind kept replaying what he had just said about a new beginning. Leaving the Liu estate was the bravest decision I had made in years. But I felt like a timid and cowardly fugitive. Returning to the remote little town, shrinking back into that cottage. I never thought about what to do next. Was I just going to waste away my life in the cottage? I was only 25 years old, the future held infinite possibilities. Caleb finished setting up the tent and then brought me food and water. He flopped down on the mat beside me, hands behind his head, looking up at the star-filled night sky. "Evelyn, do you want to try looking at the stars like this? It feels different." At the Liu estate, I was always required to follow various rules of etiquette. Everything I did had to conform to the status of Mrs. Liu. The most common phrase I heard was, "Madam, you cannot do that." Lying down like this to look at the stars, I had never even considered it before. But now, Caleb didn't give me time to think. He reached out, grabbed me, and pulled me from the stool onto the mat. "Quick, lie down." I no longer held back and did as he said. Lying down, the starry sky seemed close enough to touch. Caleb and I lay there, looking at the vast expanse of stars, chatting about everything under the sun. I also made a decision in my heart. To be brave and step out. Just walking away was merely escaping. I should meet new friends, see the wide world outside, until even if he were right in front of me, he would be insignificant. I fell into a deep sleep in the latter half of the night. Although I was in a simple tent outside, I felt more at ease than ever before. In the morning, I groggily walked out of the tent. Caleb had already set up his easel, and the look on his face had become serious. The morning sun slowly rose, gently touching every inch of my skin. I gazed towards where the sun was rising. This was my new baggie. Ning 2. "Evelyn! Don't move!" Caleb beside me suddenly exclaimed excitedly. Startled, I froze, only able to look at him from the corner of my eye. Clearly, he was using me as a model. After he finished painting, I rubbed my aching neck. Being a model was indeed not easy. "Let me massage you." "Thank you for being my model." Caleb's hands came up. He had strong hands. I closed my eyes comfortably, enjoying his massage. All the way down the mountain, Caleb talked about his inspiration. I looked at the painting, I just thought it was quite beautiful, but I didn't understand anything beyond that. As soon as we got back, Caleb disappeared into his cottage. I turned on the television, and the sudden appearance of Edward's face on the screen made me step back in shock. The hand I was about to use to change the channel froze. I was glad I had made my decision the night before. Edward often appeared on television and online. I couldn't keep running away. In the news interview, Edward seemed unchanged. When asked about the recent rumors of marital problems, he merely gave a cold expression. "My wife is having a tantrum and will come back after she's had some fun." Everyone envied me, a helpless orphan with no one to rely on, who was taken in by the old Mrs. Liu, and eventually successfully married Edward, saying it was the fortune of a lifetime. But only being in the midst of it did I know what it was like to be ignored by everyone, resented by Edward, holding the empty title of Mrs. Liu, yet still floating like rootless duckweed at the Liu estate. Every year when the yellow roses bloomed, Edward would have the staff cut the flowers from the garden and fill vases throughout the house. The piano in the greenhouse was polished by the staff every day. Eleanor was dead, but Edward constantly reminded me of her existence. "We heard that the quarrel between you and Mrs. Liu was because of the assistant you've been bringing with you lately?" Edward frowned impatiently, instinctively reaching for the wedding rings on his finger. But there was nothing there. Only then did he remember that Evelyn had been quite firm this time, returning the rings and even daring to run away secretly. He thought of the call Mr. Arthur had made that day, frantically saying that Madam was missing. He returned home to find that the half of the wardrobe belonging to Evelyn had been emptied. Only his suits hung there, looking desolate. It was nothing more than using leaving home to force him to get rid of the woman who looked like Eleanor. He knew that she cared most about Eleanor's things, let alone a woman who resembled Eleanor. But so what? Grandma Margaret was gone, she had no family, and her only reliance was him. When she felt wronged as a child, she liked to hide by herself. She used to have Grandma Margaret to spoil her. He didn't have that kind of patience to look for her now. After suffering enough outside, she would know the goodness of the Liu estate and would come back eventually. So he told Mr. Arthur, an orphan girl, away from the Liu estate, where else could she possibly go? No one is to go look for her. Notify me when she comes back. Under Edward's impatience, the host quickly shifted the topic from personal matters to business. When talking about work, Edward's expression seemed much more relaxed. It seemed Mrs. Liu was someone whose mere mention made him frown. I poured myself a glass of ice water and found my laptop to start writing my resume. Only elderly people remained in this small town. It was very suitable for retirement, but there were few job opportunities. If I wanted to work, I had to go out. I wrote until evening, then stretched and got up to prepare dinner. A simple few dishes for dinner. Sitting at the dining table, I suddenly wondered if Caleb next door was finished with his work. Did he often forget to eat when he was painting, just like Edward did when he was working? When Grandma Margaret was still alive, Edward had stomach problems several times because he didn't eat on time. Later, whenever I had time, I would take meals to his office. At first, I was blocked outside his office by his secretary, waiting for 1 or 2 hours. Later, he seemed to get used to it and would let me in to interrupt his work. He would eat and then continue. I sighed, put on a coat, and knocked on the door of the cottage next door. I didn't hear any movement inside. Just as I was about to leave, the yard door suddenly opened. Seeing me at the door, Caleb's previously impatient face broke into a smile. "Evelyn! I was painting you. I didn't expect you to appear as soon as I opened the door." Caleb still held a paintbrush in one hand. His clothes were smudged with paint in several places, and there was paint on his face too. He looked a bit disheveled. But his smile was too dazzling, and the paint smears only seemed to accentuate it. They made him seem more vibrant. "You haven't eaten yet, have you? Do you want to come to my place for dinner?" Hearing my invitation, Caleb clutched his stomach and groaned belatedly. "So hungry! Only Evelyn cares about me. I'll just put down my brush." In the following days, Caleb and I seemed to reach a certain understanding. He came to my place for dinner every day, and when he left, he would help me clean up. He also took care of planting flowers and vegetables in the yard. It was a pity I didn't have a younger brother. Having a brother like him would be great. I applied to several companies and received interview invitations. The day I decided to leave, I woke up early to say goodbye to Caleb. As I opened the door, I saw several black cars parked in front of Caleb's cottage. Several men in suits, like bodyguards, stood beside the cars. I hesitated for a few minutes before stepping forward. Seeing me approach, a bodyguard reached out to block me. "Don't touch her." Caleb walked out of the yard, the sunshine and cheerfulness gone from his face, replaced by a hint of coldness. Caleb grabbed my hand and pulled me into his yard. The door slammed shut behind us. "Don't come in." The bodyguards exchanged glances and finally said, "Yes." "Evelyn, did you come to call me for dinner?" Without the bodyguards present, Caleb seemed to regain his previous cheerfulness. "No, I came to say goodbye." Caleb's voice suddenly rose by several decibels. "Where are you going?" I told him about applying for jobs and receiving interview invitations. "Although it's nice here, you said on the mountain that day that every day is a new beginning, with infinite possibilities and vitality. I also want to give myself a new life, to live without regrets." "So Evelyn, have you let go of that person in your heart?" I looked at him with some surprise. Caleb blinked. "Don't treat me like a kid." A painter's eyes are very sharp. Being told that, I felt a little embarrassed. Yes, I suppose I have. Then where are you going to work, Evelyn? Northwood. Although I had thought about moving to a city farther away from Edward, I had lived in Northwood ever since Grandma Margaret took me in. I grew up there, studied there, and my classmates were also there. Why should I force myself to move to a strange city just for Edward and gradually adapt to everything in the new city? Then I'll go with you, Evelyn. It just so happens my family came looking for me. Unexpectedly, I ended up hitching a ride in Caleb's car. The nervous feeling of returning to Northwood and potentially facing Edward again gradually faded as Caleb talked endlessly about his plans. Life back in Northwood seemed to go smoothly. The interview went well, and I received a notice to start next week. I rented an apartment near the company. However, after disappearing for 2 days, Caleb became my neighbor again. I went out to take out the trash and saw workers moving furniture in and out of the apartment next door. Glancing over, I saw the tall Caleb standing inside, directing the workers on where to place the furniture. What are you doing here? I was going to surprise you, but you found me. Caleb naturally bent down and took the trash bag from my hand. I missed your cooking, so I came back to be your neighbor and mooch off your meals again. His appearance was indeed a pleasant surprise. Living in an unfamiliar place, having him as a neighbor made me feel a bit more secure. Then I'll make a few dishes later to celebrate your move. For convenience, we finally decided to have pizza and tacos at home. The spicy sauce boiled vigorously. Caleb scooped up a piece of tripe he had just cooked and put it in my bowl. After just one bite, I was so spicy I couldn't help but grab the drink next to me and gulp it down. Oh, you can't eat spicy food? I heard you say you love pizza and tacos, so I thought. It's okay, maybe I haven't had it in a while, I'm just a little unaccustomed. How long had it been since I last had pizza and tacos? I could barely remember. I used to love it the most. When Grandma Margaret was around, she would eat it with me. She would have the mild version, and I would have the spicy. One time, Edward worked late in a meeting, and the food I brought was already cold. It happened to be lightly snowing outside, so I suggested we go out to eat. I took him for pizza and tacos. Edward always preferred bland flavors, so I specifically ordered a split pot with mild and spicy sections. But Edward frowned the entire time. On the way home after eating, he said, "Don't eat that again. You smell all over after eating it." From then on, I never had spicy pizza and tacos. When you don't eat something for too long, even your taste buds become unaccustomed. But thankfully, I soon started sweating and rediscovered the joy of eating pizza and tacos. After eating, Caleb cleared the table, cleaned the kitchen, and opened the windows to ventilate. He took out the trash bag when he left. Life back in Northwood was quieter than I expected. The media didn't discuss the long-absent Mrs. Liu, and no one from the Liu estate came looking for me. My existence was never worth paying attention to. However, the media became more curious about the assistant Edward always had by his side. I casually scrolled through the paparazzi photos. It felt incredibly ironic. Did Edward truly love Eleanor that much? In the photos, Edward was bent over, allowing the woman to adjust his tie. Getting into the car, he carefully shielded her head. On a rainy day, the woman held the umbrella high for him, and when he took it, he tilted it entirely towards her side. So, love for one person could be transferred so easily just because of a similar face. Edward had always protected Eleanor's information very well. No photos were ever leaked. Everyone was speculating whether I had been completely cast aside by Edward. If I were still at the Liu estate, perhaps I would be waiting for a husband who didn't come home. But now I was busy organizing proposals, busy with meetings. Busy. Caleb, I told you you can't keep clinging to me like this. I pushed away the head resting on my shoulder. Caleb pushed my laptop away, displeased. You have a handsome guy like me right in front of you. Why are you staring blankly at an old man? It was the first time I had heard anyone call Edward an old man. Just imagining Edward's expression if he knew, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. When I finished laughing and looked up, I found Caleb's expression had turned serious. Is he the person who hurt you before? Edward Liu from the Liu group, I know him. I looked at him with some surprise. As I recalled, I had never seen Caleb at the Liu estate. When I was a kid, my mom made me call him uncle. I couldn't help it again, covering my stomach, I laughed so hard I collapsed onto the sofa. Ha ha ha. He's only 4 years older than you, how see? And you call him uncle, haha. Caleb pinched my face. He looks old. Edward had been involved in company affairs since he was young, and at a young age, he seemed more mature than his peers. Perhaps that wasn't entirely wrong. So, you're the Mrs. Liu who disappeared from the Liu estate. Caleb's face suddenly loomed large before me. Only then did I realize how I had ended up resting my head on Caleb's lap while laughing. I wanted to push him away and sit up, but he was uncharacteristically unyielding, his eyes fixed on me, seemingly insisting on an answer. Yes. Then am I your kept man outside? Caleb burst into laughter at his own words. I reached out and slapped him playfully. Don't talk nonsense. Besides, I've already left the Liu estate and returned the rings to him. Then I'll find a lawyer, and you can divorce him tomorrow. There's no need. We never legally married. I smiled bitterly. We never legally married, so there was no need for a divorce. Our only connection was that single pair of rings, symbolizing a marriage that wasn't legally binding. Perhaps I had been Mrs. Liu for so long that even Edward forgot that we never had a marriage certificate. Well, perfect. How about you help me get a marriage certificate instead? Looking at the freshly issued marriage certificate in my hand, I felt momentarily lost. Back then, I thought my marriage certificate would have a photo of Edward and me. I never imagined that the groom wouldn't be him. Last night, after Caleb's relentless coaxing, I agreed to a fake marriage to appease his family. Caleb took the marriage certificate from my hand. I'll take it back to show my family first, otherwise my mom will keep thinking I'm lying to her. This marriage felt unreal. The grand wedding 3 years ago had the ceremony but no marriage certificate. Everything felt like a false happiness staged for outsiders. Now, I had the marriage certificate but no wedding. Yet, I felt a sense of peace in my heart. Perhaps because I had no expectations, there was no disappointment. Caleb took the marriage certificate home and came back with good news. My parents have agreed to let me hold a painting exhibition. These are the works I'm most satisfied with. A month later, Caleb's painting exhibition was a success. I had to work overtime that day and it was almost 8 o'clock when I finished. As I rushed to the exhibition, I saw a figure in the crowd leaving who looked very much like Edward from behind. Shaking my head, it must just be someone with a similar build. Entering the venue, many of the paintings displayed were familiar. Several young women nearby excitedly walked past me with exhibition catalogs. Quick, quick, Caleb seems to be up ahead. We have to get his autograph this time. I heard this is his last exhibition. If we miss it, we really won't get his autograph. I followed the gaze of the young women. Indeed, I saw Caleb, towering above the crowd. He was looking down, patiently signing autographs for the people in front of him. I thought this was his first exhibition. Why would it be his last? I scanned the area and finally found the introduction about Caleb near the entrance. It turned out he was already a renowned painter. His previous works had toured the country, and many of his pieces had sold for sky-high prices. I stood rooted to the spot, suddenly hesitant to approach. The Caleb described in this introduction didn't seem like the big boy I knew who would cling to me and act spoiled. I quietly left. As I came out, I saw Edward standing by the roadside, frowning and talking on the phone. So I hadn't been mistaken earlier. Edward repeatedly dialed the number he had never actively contacted before. Although he knew that only a mechanical voice would announce that Evelyn's number was disconnected. But he found that besides this number, he didn't know who else to contact to find her. Thinking of the profile he saw at the exhibition earlier, a faint sense of unease flickered in his heart. He used to be most fortunate about Evelyn's background. She had no family, and her friends seemed pitifully few. She was a helpless orphan in this world. Only he and the Liu estate could be her reliance. So he always thought that even if she died, Evelyn would never truly leave the Liu estate. Mr. Arthur had called once before and told him the number was disconnected. He hadn't given it much thought then. Unless she dies outside, she'll come back eventually. Mr. Arthur had been greatly alarmed upon hearing that. Madam couldn't possibly have met with an accident, could she? He scoffed. How could that be possible? If something had really happened, the police would have contacted him, her husband, long ago. But half a year had passed. Evelyn hadn't reappeared. When he saw that painting today, he felt his heart pound fiercely. The person in the painting looked so much like Evelyn, yet somehow not entirely. The light in the woman's eyes in the painting was more vibrant than the morning sun behind her. So radiant that one dared not look directly. Evelyn wasn't like that. She was more like a pool of still water that would never ripple. Even a clay figure had a bit of a temper, but Evelyn was made of water. A gentle squeeze, let alone a temper, she couldn't even squeeze out an angry word for half a day. When bullied severely, she would just hide by herself. He had once seen her hiding by the greenhouse, crying alone. Hearing his footsteps, she would dart back into her room and hide, like a startled kitten. What he disliked most back then was her being so awkward and not presenting herself well. She was clearly Mrs. Liu, yet she only dared to put on airs outside. Once she returned to the Liu estate, she reverted to her original self. He wanted to buy that painting, hang it in Evelyn's room, let her look at it every day, and be influenced by it. But Caleb said, "This is the port rate of my wife I'm most satisfied with. I'm sorry, I can't part with it." When he heard those words, he felt a strange sense of relief. The person in the painting really wasn't Evelyn. But after leaving the exhibition, he became inexplicably anxious to contact Evelyn. She had been angry for too long, surely, she should come back by now. After a series of mechanical voices, he finally lost his patience and looked at the bodyguards. "Go find out where my wife is. Once you find her, bring her back directly." When the Liu estate bodyguards knocked on the door, Caleb was setting the table in the dining area. As soon as the door opened, several bodyguards rushed in but were blocked by him. "Who are you looking for?" The bodyguard's gaze fell upon me, holding a spatula. "Madam, Mr. Liu sent us to bring you back." It had been half a year since I last heard that address. For a moment, it felt like another lifetime. "What nonsense are you spouting? This is my wife." Caleb pushed the bodyguards back outside. They exchanged glances. One of them took out his phone and dialed Edward's number. "Mr. Liu, Madam seems to be married." Edward's arrival was faster than I expected. Within a few minutes, he was already standing at the door, his face terribly grim. The bodyguards moved aside, and Edward tried to push past Caleb, who was blocking the way. He couldn't budge him. "Get him out of my way!" Edward roared at the bodyguards. "Edward, you're breaking into my home and trying to take my wife. That doesn't seem appropriate, does it?" Edward finally looked directly at Caleb in front of him. "So the person in your painting is my wife? Shouldn't I be the one asking you for an explanation?" "Explanation for what? We're legally married. She is my lawful wife." Edward sneered, his gaze meeting mine across the distance. "Evelyn, have you gotten bolder? Running off and getting married to someone else behind my back? Come back now, and I'll pretend none of this happened." Edition. He extended a hand towards me. Every time before, whenever he extended his hand, I would grasp it without hesitation. But this time, I didn't move. "Edward, I've already returned the rings to you. From now on, we're even." "Even? My family raised you from a young age, and you want to cut ties with me with just one word? Evelyn, what the hell are you talking about?" Edward's eyes were bloodshot. Caleb wasn't paying attention and Edward managed to push past him. My hand was seized by him, my wrist felt like it was about to break from his grip. "You go get a divorce from him right now. Don't you want to get married to me? Get the divorce, and then we'll get married." With my free hand, I slapped Edward across the face. Everyone in the room froze. Edward seemed stunned for a long moment, as if he couldn't process what I had done. "Edward, what are you going crazy for? I've already left the Liu estate, and I don't want that marriage certificate anymore." "I left. You can take whoever you want back. Isn't it better if we just let each other go?" Why should I let you go? You were raised by my family. You'll die at the Liu estate if you have to. Edward suddenly picked me up. Just as he reached the door, he was stopped by Caleb's family bodyguards who had just arrived out of the elevator. Mr. Liu, if you dare take her today, I'll sue you for kidnapping. You don't think I can't protect my own wife, do you? I was still shaken. This situation was something I had never imagined. I thought that if I left, Edward would feel relieved, and if I suggested we were even, perhaps he would even be happy. Why was he acting like this now? Who was he putting on this show for? I don't know whose bodyguards made the first move, but the scene quickly devolved into chaos. Caleb also started fighting with Edward. Fortunately, Caleb won. But Edward had punched him on the left cheek, and it looked quite bad. Mr. Liu, you're getting old. Fighting isn't really suitable FO. Are you? It's better to be less reckless in the future. I tugged at Caleb's sleeve, afraid that Edward would retaliate against him later. Edward had never gotten into a fight since he was a child, let alone been this beaten up. Several bodyguards were also injured. You guys help him back. Don't come looking for me again. I pulled Caleb back into the house. He clutched his face, frowning. Wife, he hit hard. Check if I'm disfigured. I got out the first aid kit. Stop calling me that. I'll put some antiseptic solution on it. As I leaned closer, he suddenly turned his head and kissed me on the lips. This works better than antiseptic solution. Why did you just let me call you wife when Edward was here? I put the iodine in his hand. You said back then that we were just getting a certificate, not really getting married. Caleb smiled triumphantly. I just wanted to get a legal title first, so Mr. Liu wouldn't snatch you away. You tricked me into marriage. Yes, I traded going back to work for the company for my marital freedom. If this is tricking you into marriage, I've also committed my entire life to it. If you divorce me again, I'll have no wife and have to work at the company for the rest of my life. How miserable. I finally understood why he had said it was his last exhibition. I poked the side of his face where he was injured. Are you stupid? Yes. So don't leave me. At least my latter half of life will be painful but happy. I nodded, and Caleb pressed his advantage. Wife, can I kiss you openly now? Before I could answer, his kiss had already landed. The situation quickly got out of control. Caleb was like a child who had finally gotten his snack. By the time I wanted to push him away, I had melted into a puddle. Caleb, don't. Don't be afraid. I'll be gentle. In a daze, I finally truly experienced what Caleb meant about having good stamina. Caleb moved houses with me. He said he was afraid Edward would come and harass us again. Changing locations did provide some peace for a while, until Caleb took me to a bridal shop to choose a wedding dress. I had no idea we were having a wedding. I've been planning since the day we got the certificate. When I painted that picture, I was thinking I had to make you the most beautiful bride. Caleb personally handled all the wedding arrangements. I was only occasionally pulled by his mother to give him some input. While choosing a hotel, I unexpectedly ran into Edward in the central garden. I originally wanted to bypass him and leave, but he saw me first. Evelyn, won't you come back? I'll take good care of you for the rest of my life, just like Grandma Margaret said. The Liu estate is where you grew up from a young age. Don't you want me, and don't you even want our home? I pulled my hand from his grasp. I was at the Liu estate for so many years, and you never treated me as family. I have a new family now. I just hope you won't bother me anymore. Caleb's parents liked me very much, especially when they learned that my parents had died early and I had no other relatives in the world. Caleb's mother held me and cried heartbrokenly. She said she would be my mother from now on. I really liked the family Caleb gave me. It was a home I could truly belong to. At the Liu estate, my only relative was Grandma Margaret. Grandma Margaret was gone, so there was nothing left to yearn for. I saw Caleb come out and waved to him, running towards him. He helped me tighten my coat and held me close, turning his head to talk to the hotel manager beside us about the details. Edward stood rooted to the spot, his gaze following my departing figure. But that figure never looked back, not once. Epilogue. Edward's perspective. I've always prided myself on never misjudging people in my years in the business world. But I never expected that I had never truly understood Evelyn, the person closest to me. I thought she was a helpless orphan, easy to manipulate. But after leaving, she suddenly became bold. Back then, Grandma Margaret insisted we get married. I agreed orally but only held a ceremony for her sake. I deliberately didn't get the marriage certificate with her. She endured it, not even complaining to Grandma Margaret. I deliberately placed Eleanor's favorite yellow roses in front of her, watching the paleness appear on her face, and finally knew what she minded. So when the woman who looked like Eleanor appeared before me, I agreed without hesitation. Sure enough, Evelyn's face turned extremely ugly, but I didn't expect her to lose her temper and even throw our wedding rings. I always thought she was just a child running away from home, but I never expected that she had grown up without me noticing. I was no longer her only reliance. She had a job, new friends, and was even married. I waited downstairs for the bodyguards to bring her back, but then I heard a bodyguard say she was married. I almost dropped my phone. She said she wanted us to be even, as if she wanted to sever all ties with me and become strangers for the rest of her life. In my agitation, I struck out. And I actually couldn't beat that brat. I remembered how annoying he was when he was a kid. I was only a few years older than him, and he called me uncle. Now that he's grown up, he's even more annoying. But when Evelyn saw he was injured, her eyes were filled with concern. Perhaps she didn't even realize it, but her eyes only held that brat, while she faced me with full vigilance. Suddenly, I felt like I had lost something I might never get back. Their wedding invitations were delivered to my hand, the smiles of the two people in the photo particularly jarring. We had also had a grand wedding back then, but I was so perfunctory that I couldn't even be bothered to take a photo with her. I left all the arrangements to Mr. Arthur, remaining detached, as if I were just a guest attending the wed. She must have been disappointed with that wedding, right? For so many years, I got used to her being by my side, took her efforts for granted, and always thought she would stay. Only now did I realize that some people, once lost, will never belong to me again. She no longer wanted the Liu estate, and I was forever left behind there by her.